Whether you're listening on your car radio at home or watching the Salem News Channel, welcome. We've got a big show ahead. Senator Tom Cotton coming up a little bit later. Douglas Murray is the author of the brand new book on democracies and death cults is coming along. But in a day of market turbulence, I am glad to welcome Senator Marsha Blackburn from the great state of Tennessee. Hello, Senator. How are you?
I'm doing great. I hope that you are also.
I am. It's been another. The market's off its lows. It's not panicked. I think the Dow's down by 1%, and S&P is off a little bit, but the Nasdaq's down 0.11%. What do you think about the market volatility the last 3 days, trading days?
Yeah, and I think it's important to keep in mind what is actually happening here on Capitol Hill. And President Trump has said that he was going to push forward quickly, and indeed we are. You have seen the Senate and the House both have passed their budget documents so we can make tax cuts permanent. You've got DOGE that has found $140 billion in savings for the taxpayers. We are working now on building out that budget and doing our reconciliation, making those tax cuts permanent. And the president has over 50 countries that have already come to the table on tariffs and have said, we want access to the U.S. market, so we're willing to negotiate this. That will help to get prices down and inflation down and make the cost of living more affordable, which is exactly what we want to do. Get this inflation down, grow the economy, see manufacturing jobs come back to our shores.
So have you been at all alarmed? Have you heard from constituents who hate volatility? Now, I've gone through the 1987 Black Friday, through the dot-com bubble, through 9/11 crash, through the 2008 financial crisis, through the COVID shutdown crash. This is number 6. So I'm kind of used to volatility. But I tell my kids every 8 years, 9 years, 10 years, something's going to happen to make the market volatile. So it doesn't bother me. But does it bother your constituents in Tennessee?
We're hearing about tariffs from our auto manufacturers and people that are importers of products that are made specifically and only in a certain country. And our ag chemical businesses have things that they have to import and formulate or synthesize. You've got people that are importing chocolate, like Mars Candy. They've got a headquarters in Tennessee. They're concerned about that. You've got people that import fireworks. They're only made in China. So we're hearing about people that are constrained. Their supply chains are constrained because of things that are only made in certain places. Also, we have auto manufacturers that are foreign manufacturers, but they have chosen to locate in Tennessee. And of course, they're importing some of the component parts and assembling in the U.S., and there are constraints on them. These are all issues that we are working on. We know that there will need to be some waivers, and we want to make certain that we get jobs here. And I think that's the thing to keep in mind, is that President Donald Trump wants to help reset, helps to grow our economy and get good, high-paying jobs here in the U.S. He wants to see wages increase. He wants people to feel like they can go out and start a business and benefit from that. That's how you encourage that growth. And there is a formula that I use all the time when it comes to economic growth and building economic power for our communities, our states, and our nation. And it is less regulation plus less litigation plus less taxation equals more innovation and job creation. It works every single time. And President Trump is trying to remove barriers and obstacles to economic growth.
All right, so Senator, let me ask about that bill that you passed on the weekend. Senate had a couple of marathon sessions, got it done. It's now back in the House's course. You return served. They sent you a budget. You sent a budget back. If they just sign it, you can get to work. But I know at least one additional House member beyond Member Massey stepped up and said he didn't like what you did. Do you think that the House, you've been in both chambers, do you think that the House will give it the chop and move it forward so we can get on to the reconciliation trailer bills, or are we going to have another volley?
I hope that they take it, sign it so that we can get to work. Bear in mind, your budget document sets your ceilings, and we need to work within that. Of course, in the Senate, we want to cut more than the House wanted to cut. And I think that the fact that the more conservative document is coming out of the Senate has surprised some people, but we're going to stick with what we got. I think you're going to see us united in working toward getting President Donald Trump's agenda passed. That is what the American people voted for. That is the mandate that they sent on November 5th. They expect us to make the tax cuts permanent, to get the border secure, both the southern and northern border. They want to make certain that we get crime down in our communities and that we restore our standing in the world. And I'll have to add, they want to make certain that we get men out of women's sports.
Well, yes, I don't know if that's in the budget and reconciliation. I hope it is. But in terms of the process, if the House just votes yay on what you sent them back, then the committees on both sides can get to work on the particulars of the tax code. Have I got that right, on the particulars of the border, on the particulars of the defense buildup?
You're
if
correct
they just say
about
yes.
that.
And then you have 51
Yes,
vote
you're
margin.
correct about that. And I can assure you that the Senate is already working on what a reconciliation bill would look like. We have not been sitting around wasting time. We want to get the president's agenda finished. We want the American people to see movement, and we want to make the tax cuts permanent so that we prohibit what would be the largest tax increase in history on the American people.
So last question, Senator Blackburn. If that Senate and House tax relief made permanent bill passes, it will have a wonderful effect on markets and on volatility, on confidence. Does that inspire urgency against the backdrop of the volatility? In other words, let's get this done to offset the uncertainty that was introduced by the tariff negotiations, which will not be in public.
And I think everybody wants to get this done because they know the 2017 tax provisions would expire at the end of the year, and they want to chalk up a win for the American people and for President Trump's agenda. So the sooner we get this done, the better it is.
All right, Senator Marcia Blackburn, thank you so much for joining me from the great state of Tennessee. It's been a wild day on Wall Street thus far. Let me bring you up to speed on where we are at a quarter after the hour. And again, it may change before the close of the market, but I just wanted to let you know. It was down a lot. Now it's down a little bit. The Dow is down 1%. This is brought to you by AmericanFederal.com. American Federal buys and sells gold. You can call them at 800-221-7694. If you're watching on the Salem News Channel, you will see 1-800-221-7694 on your screen, or you can go to AmericanFederal.com. They buy and sell gold. Here's what the market's telling you right now. The Dow is down 1.4%. The S&P is down 0.77%. The NASDAQ is down 0.5%. And gold is down 1.6%. So gold is back below $3,000 an ounce. It's at $2,986 an ounce. So those of you who are waiting for it to drop below $3,000, that was what your buy point has been passed. Call Nick Grovich and his team if that was your buy point. If you said, "Oh, I missed it. I thought it wasn't going to get to $3,000 for 6 months. Then it went to $3,100. Now it's down to $2,980." Look, I don't give financial advice. I just give you the updates. I do give a reference for Nick Grovich because I use Nick and I talk with Nick and I bought my gold from AmericanFederal.com. And it's no muss, no fuss, straightforward, honest, transparent. Get it done on a couple of steps. You call and talk about how much you're going to buy, and they tell you what the commission's going to be. Then you get them the money, and they get you the gold, and it's 1, 2, 3, done. It's not complicated. They're not upselling you. They do have a collector's division for people who want to do numismatics or whatever they call that. That's not for me. I'm not a coin collector, not interested in it. But it's there if you're one of those people. But if you're not, you just want to buy gold and silver for your safety deposit box in order to diversify, and you haven't done it in a while, and you're sitting on some cash, and the market says, "Yeah, I don't want to put it into the market, and I'm a little bit afraid I'll miss out on some upside on gold," well, then call Nick and his team at AmericanFederal.com, 1-800-221-7694. Olivia Beavers joins me from the Wall Street Journal. Olivia, I've been checking in on the Journal a lot through these last 3 days, market days of trading volatility. Seems a little bit calmer today. Is that the sense in Washington, D.C., that people are settling down?
No, that's definitely, at least that's not the sense that I'm getting. I mean, we're tracking how Republicans are feeling about the tariffs, and just last night there was a phone call where some House Republicans were asking Speaker Johnson to get top Trump administration officials to come brief them because they feel like they're hearing a lot of different sort of messaging publicly on the Sunday shows and whatnot, and they want to know what the administration's plan is, how long they want to go, and they want to basically be able to go tell their constituents and the businesses back home, hey, here's what we're hearing, plan accordingly. So I still think there's quite a, some jitters, which happens whenever there is a market spook. And I think you're even sort of seeing it with some Twitter posts online of the market responding for Twitter X posts that weren't actually, even
Yeah,
real.
I I had Senator Blackburn on right before you, and she said like Mars wants to talk about chocolate because they import a lot of chocolate, and they've got a lot of questions about tariffs. But the market volatility, maybe it's because I've been doing this for so long. I went through it with Senator Blackburn. We had Black Friday in 1987. We had the dot-com bubble during Clinton. We had the 9/11 sell-off. We had the panic in 2008, which was the worst of them all. We had the COVID shutdown and bounce back. This is actually kind of small compared to that, Olivia. I mean, I do think there's a bit of overreaction going on here.
Definitely small. I think, like, though, anything can sort of get the market jitters going. So you're just sort of seeing some response with the uncertainty. You were seeing it even before the president announced. And I'm not claiming that it's anything, compared to what those large moments were. I think the concern is that it could be heading in that direction, but that's way too early to say. And in Congress, they're suggesting that if they can get the president's reconciliation plan, Republicans they're saying like this will help, us message that we're strengthening the market and there's going to be more stability.
That I agree. In fact, I talked about that with Senator Blackburn. If the House just gives the chop to the Senate version of the budget, then they can proceed to the specifics. Is that going to happen, or is the House going to return, serve, and have another volley back and forth?
It's not looking great at the moment. It's hard to say because, as we've seen repeatedly this year, President Trump could swoop in, exert some pressure, and change some minds and make some promises. But right now, it's not just the Freedom Caucus members who are saying that they don't like basically what the Senate sent back, which is, a floor for less cuts and more tax cuts, more money for tax cuts. It's budget hawks. So you have Jody Arrington, David Schweikert, and a few others who are privately raising concerns on this, phone call last night, saying that they don't like it and they can't support it. So it's a broader group, and I think the speaker is going to be moving on it quickly this week. They want to get it done before a 2-week recess, so they're going to be whipping until basically Thursday, trying to get this done. And maybe they'll be able to pull together the votes.
How many
and
hard
twist some
no's?
arms.
Massey's a hard nose. I believe that Chip Roy is a hard no. Who had David Schweikert said? Because Schweikert could get wiped out in a primary. That would surprise me if David Schweikert voted no. He might have some objections, but I think he would go along. Jody Arrington would surprise me. He's budget chair. How many are hard no's?
So one member said he was a no, who's a budget hawk on the phone call last night. Schweikert has put out a statement indicating he's a no. Arrington also suggested he's not okay with it. I don't know if he's explicitly a no. Chip Roy is a no. Andy Harris implied he's not okay with it. And so I think Andy Ogles also just put out another tweet saying that the plan was an America first, but not, you know, an explicit no. So that's something that I think we're going to be doing a full tally, but it's really not looking like they have the necessary votes in this thin majority, which is
How
the theme
many
of
do
this
we?
year.
How many can the Republicans lose? I lose track because they filled 2 vacancies last week, and we've had 2 untimely deaths of Democrats. So right now is the biggest margin for error they're going to have for the rest of the Congress.
Yep. I think, well, it depends on attendance, especially with Democrats, but it's, like last time they had 1 vote to spare, and that was Massey's. So I think the math is like maybe 1 more, but um, yeah, it depends also on
I
attendance.
think it's actually up to 4. I think
You think
Massey
it's up to 4?
happened. Yeah, I think they can lose 4, but I leave that to you. You're the expert on that. Let me conclude with this. Speaker Johnson wants a vote this week.
Yes, he does. They want it done before the Easter recess, before they leave for 2 weeks, and go back to their home districts. So that's been the plan all along. And I think that, they take the Easter break pretty seriously and no one wants to stay. I don't know if that's even being threatened yet. I think they're working really hard to get it done this week. But the speaker is basically urging Republicans to just take the plan that was sent by the Senate and get writing and pass the reconciliation bill.
Well, the reconciliation I'm adding a question. The reconciliation bill is many bills, right? It's not just one bill; it's many bills.
Right, but it's basically they need to have some sort of agreement with the framework from
That's right.
both
The framework is
chambers
this
to
week.
unlock it.
Well, Olivia, I hope you're right. I hope they get it done this week. I will keep posted via you. Follow Olivia on X at Olivia_Beavers. Read her in the Wall Street Journal. Do not miss her. Let me talk to Generalissimo for a moment. Generalissimo, your phone wasn't working on Friday night. I kept asking you for updates from the Guardians game.
It's the same anomaly that happened to your phone on Sunday.
Well, the internet was down at Angel Stadium
It
yesterday.
must have been down on Friday night, too.
But I was Jose Ramirez hit 3 home runs. Did you enjoy that?
I enjoyed the series immensely. The series
Jose
that the Angels
Ramirez
won
hit
was
3
terrific.
home runs. I've never seen that. I've seen Andre Thornton hit for the Cyclone person. Have you ever seen someone hit 3 home runs?
I have.
Or Jose Ramirez?
No.
Well, let me talk about myphdweightloss.com. Angel Stadium is not myphdweightloss.com friendly.
Not the best. No, not the best.
There's nothing at my PhD weight loss unless you take the hot dog
And throw the bun
and
to
throw
the
the
birds.
bun away
Yes.
and somehow put the mustard on.
Yes.
There's nothing there, right?
And even the hot dog. They've got hamburgers. You can have hamburger
Yes, you
patties.
can. You can have hamburgers. 864
644.
1900. Dwayne lost 50 pounds on my PhD weight loss.
Not at Angel Stadium.
Not at Angel Stadium, but you can still go and just have water and a dog with mustard, but no bun. 864
644.
1900. That's
864.
644
1900.
Connection to myphdweightloss.com. Work for Dwayne, it'll work for you. I spent Saturday at Prager University taping a show that will be airing pretty soon. But if you're missing Dennis until he returns to the air, we hope in June, here's a little bit of a Pragertopia taste.
Given my supposition that the more people and the more things, the more interests that excite you, the happier you will be, the more you derive joy from, then can you become like that? Or do you have to have that in your nature? That's my question.
That's a good question. You want to hear the answer to it? Subscribe to Pragertopia. That's the best way to do it. Also want to remind everyone, on May 1 and 2, I am going to the Job Creator Network Freedom Fighters Summit. It's in Savannah, Georgia. Bill Bennett's going, Mike Gallagher, Stephen Moore, Kellyanne Conway. Grover Norquist will be there. We'll also, I think, have Governor Glenn Youngkin of Virginia, Governor Brian Kemp of Georgia, all sorts of people. And Savannah's great fun. It's a great fun event, and it's May 1 and May 2. You got to have a ticket to go, and tickets are almost gone. So if you want to go, head to jcn2025summit.com. Now, JCN, the Job Creators Network, all right? JCN 2025summit.com, promo code Salem. By the way, by that time, we'll have a lot more clarity on tariff rollout, the Great Reset, the Trump shock. Who knows what it's going to be called? What it's going to be called is very, very different from what we've done before with our trading partners, both those who are our friends and those who are not our friends. China, we're just throwing hammers at each other. And Trump, the president, came out today and said, I'm going to hit you again, China. If you retaliate again, I'm going to hit you again. They can't beat us at this. They can't. That's a whole different ballgame from our allies. Our allies were just trying to get to fair in the eyes of the president. China, we want to discourage people from producing goods that we need in China. We want them to make it here. Marsha Blackburn mentioned fireworks. Okay, China can make fireworks. We're just going to charge a lot more than we used to. And I know the people that put up the fireworks stores, they might have to go find a firework outlet somewhere other than in China. And that's going to be disruptive. And it might mean that the 4th of July blowout will be a little bit more muted this year. But we'll find out at the Job Creators Network Summit. Head there, find out for yourself. And I think that probably Stephen Moore will have a pretty good figure on that by the time we get there. President Trump was on Air Force One yesterday talking about tariffs, cut number 3.
We're going to put tariffs on. We've already put them on. It's not a question if we will. We're going to put them on. And those tariffs next year will make us $1 trillion. In addition to the $1 trillion, thousands of companies are going to relocate back into the United States. In North Carolina, already furniture people are starting to move back in. In Detroit and Michigan, which I won, because of what I said, what I'm telling you, car companies are starting to open up. In Indiana, a big one is under construction.
He's aware of the markets, by the way. Cut number 4.
On the idea of crashing the markets on purpose, there's been some speculation, partly because of the video that was posted on Truth Social, that there was some sort of deliberate effort on your part to have the market sell off. Can you talk about that?
No, that's not so. But I do want to solve the deficit problem that we have with China, with the European Union and other nations. And they're going to have to do that. And if they want to talk about that, I'm open to talking. But otherwise, why would I want to talk?
Yeah, what's amazing to me, people who actually deal in conspiracy theories that Trump tanked the market. Trump's in the market. Trump's in a blind trust, of course, but he's in the market. He doesn't like the market to go down. He wants to rebalance the market. Now, he may have made a mistake. I don't know. I'm a 6-month talk to me in 6-month guy, but I don't subscribe to him wanting to tank the market. That's just not the way he operates. Here's the way I operate: relief factor. Now, the only exercise I got yesterday was going up and down the steps at Angel Stadium and straining my neck as the Indians' guardians did not make the fly ball catches. Steve Kwan probably needs this today. Steve Kwan's a heck of a left fielder, and I was maybe 10 feet from him at one point, and he hit the wall when the first home run went out. And if he'd been able to set, he could have. If he'd had relief factor, Steve Kwan could have made that catch. He banged into the wall. That cannot feel good. I know a lot of center fielders and outfielders generally are out there. You need relief factor. It cannot feel good to hit that wall. That wall he hit going fast, and he was not at all ready for it, and he was doing the best that he could, just a bit outside of his mitt. And unfortunately, then the game went south. My exercise was going up and down steps. So I just need the relief factor for my knees today. So I take it every day. If you're watching on the Salem News Channel, you always see me take it. If you're listening, you hear me take it. I tell you, call 1-800, the number 4, and the word relief, or go to their website, relieffactor.com. Dr. Michael Oren, fellow at the Wilson Center, is back in Washington, D.C., and a very big day for U.S.-Israel relations, former ambassador of Israel to the United States. Ambassador Oren, there's going to be the stuff that Prime Minister Netanyahu and President Trump say in public, and then there's the stuff we don't know about. What do you think they're talking about that we're not going to hear about?
Iran. I think that the tariff issue was very, very important with you. It counted for about $2.75 billion for Israel. So that's a chunk of change for our country during wartime. But I don't think that's the major reason why Prime Minister Netanyahu rushed to Washington, literally rushed to Washington. And I think you have to see there are other issues. Of course, there's the situation in Gaza. There's Turkey establishing itself in Syria now, and Mr. Erdogan saying he wants Israel to be destroyed. That's an issue. But the major issue is going to be Iran. And now the revelation by the president that the United States is conducting direct negotiations with Iran, something that not even President Biden did. If you remember, there were negotiations, but they were indirect negotiations. That is a source of concern / opportunity, but mostly concern, I think, for this prime minister. One is, will a credible military threat, U.S. military threat, remain on the table? How long would these negotiations will go on? Because the Iranians are experts at dragging these negotiations out. And in such a time as while Russia is rushing to replenish and restore Iran's air defenses. And three, what is the nature? What are the goals of this negotiation? If the goal is, as during the Obama and Biden period, merely to kick the can down the road, that's what the nuclear arrangement of 2015, the JCPOA said, it basically kicked the can down the road, froze the program for about 10 years, or is the goal, as Israel would very much want, would be to actually dismantle the program?
Now, two countries have done that in modern times. Two rogue states, South Africa and Libya. They both persuaded the world that they were sincere. What would it take for you to believe that the Ayatollah and his henchmen were sincere about denuclearizing?
If someone took a wrench and a crowbar and began to dismantle the Fordow facility, the Natanz facility, the Bashir facility, actually taking them down, taking out the 100,000 centrifuges and smashing them. And short of that, Israel will not be assuaged. There are three components to a nuclear program. There's the enrichment cycle, there's the delivery system, and there's the warhead. We know something about the warhead. I imagine there are people in the intelligence world who know more than I do. There were the revelations of the 2018 Mossad raid at the nuclear archive in Tehran. We learned a lot about the warhead research, which is going on at various Iranian universities. They have a delivery system, Hugh. They have a system that doubles. It's the same system that takes their satellites into outer space. That same rocket can hit Berlin or Paris, and with a nuclear warhead. And they have the enrichment, and we know that they're enriching uranium to very close to weapons grade. They can reach weapons grade in a matter of days, probably, produce 5 or 6 nuclear weapons if they have the warhead. All of that has to be addressed in a nuclear agreement. The JCPOA of 2015 only addressed the nuclear enrichment cycle, not the delivery system, not the warhead. And even of the enrichment cycle, it only delayed it for something like 7 to 10 years. That's why it was profoundly and totally unacceptable for the state of Israel. Beyond the fact that it also enriched Iran. It gave Iran tens of billions of dollars, which it used to, for example, build Hamas tunnels and Hezbollah rockets. So all of these issues are profoundly impactful for the state of Israel. So these are the issues I think which the prime minister are going to raise with the president and saying, okay, negotiate with the Iranians. No one really wants a war, but let us know what are the goals of this negotiations? What are the extent of the negotiations, time frame? And if the negotiations fail, if they don't meet the time frame, what are you prepared to do?
Yeah, it's that last question that matters. I have Douglas Murray coming on in hour number 3 to talk about his book on democracies and death cults. And it is anyone who reads it with an open mind, I think, will be persuaded you can't trust the Iranians. They're fanatics. It's a cult. There's no way to change their minds. Do you think the president is surrounded by enough people who believe that core belief to effectively execute a negotiation and call a foul when it's not really a negotiation?
I'm delighted, first of all, that you're having Douglas on. He's a personal, not just a personal friend, but he's also my personal hero. Okay? He's a great voice of moral clarity in the world today. And yes, I agree with him. You cannot trust the Iranians. They're going to cheat every time. And the destruction of Israel and the destruction of the United States of America, it's in their DNA. They can't change that. And so if they can't change that, you have to eliminate any means they have for acting on their DNA. which is this nuclear program, not freezing it, but dismantling it, taking it apart. And then not only just taking it apart, but you have to have it verified. You have to have people on the spot with their yellow helmets watching the cranes taking down these facilities. Short of that, no agreement. Will satisfy Israel's security needs, but no agreement will actually bring about security in the Middle East. Because under the JCPOA, everybody in the region and everybody in the world understood that Iran was, in essence, a nuclear power. It had a threshold capacity. It was a nuclear power that was on the verge of actually getting a weapon. But that enabled Iran to get admission to the BRIC Association of Advanced Economies. It helped cement a strategic alliance between Iran and China, and finally between Iran and Russia. Iran was emerging not just as a regional power, but as a world power because of its nuclear issue. And that has to be taken down because this is a state sponsor of.
We got 1 minute. Tucker Carlson is on X inveighing against a hit on Iran. What do you say to him and people who think like him, that if there's nothing in it for us, it's crazy?
But there's everything in it for the United States. Iran gets a nuclear weapon. Everything changes. America's ability to keep 2 fleets in that area, the 6th Fleet in the Eastern Mediterranean, the 5th Fleet in the Persian Gulf, to have an air base in Qatar, to have soldiers in American military presence. This is just the Middle East. This is a nuclear weapon that can go around the world. It's going to change everything. And Iran is part of an axis that includes Russia and China. So you're up against not just a conventional axis in the Middle East, you're up against a nuclear axis in the Middle East. That changes not just the regional global balance of power, it changes the international and global balance of power. And America has to understand this, that you cannot run away from this. This is a paramount national.
You and I agree. I hope that people read Douglas Murray's book and that the president and the prime minister reach an agreement as well about what is expected of Iran if we're going to believe them. Michael Oren can be followed on X at Dr. Dr. Michael Oren. He's at the Wilson Center. Thank you, Dr. Prime Minister Netanyahu, President Trump in the Oval in the last hour. Cut number 15, Prime Minister Netanyahu on the tariffs.
As you said, we had the opportunity to talk today about many subjects. First, if I can mention tariffs, it's a subject of some interest today. I can tell you that I said to the President a very simple thing. We will eliminate the trade deficit with the United States. We intend to do it very quickly. We think it's the right thing to do. And we're going to also eliminate trade barriers, a variety of trade barriers that have been put up unnecessarily. And I think Israel can serve as a model for many countries who ought to do the same. I recognize the position of the United States. It says, we're allowing other countries to put tariffs on us, but we don't put tariffs on them. And, I'm a free trade champion, and free trade has to be fair trade. And I think that's basically the position that you have put forward, Mr. President. We are going to eliminate the tariffs, and rapidly. I had the opportunity to speak to Secretary Lutnick yesterday. We talked about how we could effect this quickly, and I hope to bring the solution very quickly. We're not talking about intentions. We're not talking about just words. We're talking about results. And those results are going to come.
And then the President Trump, said this about direct negotiations with Iran, cut number 16.
Wait a minute, wait. We're having direct talks with Iran, and they've started. It'll go on Saturday. We have a very big meeting, and we'll see what can happen. And I think everybody agrees that doing a deal would be preferable to doing the obvious. And the obvious is not something that I want to be involved with, or frankly, that Israel wants to be involved with if they can avoid it. So we're going to see if we can avoid it. But it's getting to be very dangerous territory. And hopefully those talks will be successful. And I think it would be in Iran's best interest if they are successful. We hope that's going to happen. And we had just a lot of good talks on a lot of things. I appreciate very much what you said about the tariffs. We've been ripped off and taken advantage of by many countries over the years, and can't do it anymore. Just can't do it anymore. We can't be the stupid people anymore. And it's all because of the people that sat in the seat right here, not your seat, but this seat. They allowed things to happen to our country that they shouldn't have allowed to happen on trade and other things, many other things.
Can't be the stupid people anymore. By the way, in the room with him, Vice President Vance, Secretary Rubio, Secretary Hegseth, National Security Advisor Waltz, along with the President and Prime Minister Netanyahu and his team. I have more for you. Dwayne is busy readying the cuts. You can watch it on the Salem News Channel. You can see the actual film, or you can hear it here on the Salem Radio Network, but you got to come back for hour 2. In hour 3, Douglas Murray joins me to talk about his book on democracies and death cults, New York Times bestseller, I'm sure, and provocative, very, very profound, and necessary, especially at this moment when we are doing direct talks with the fanatics in Tehran. President Trump and Prime Minister Netanyahu continue their conversation. It's ongoing in the Oval. We have some clips for you. If you're watching on the Salem News Channel, you can see them. We also can, of course, play them across the Salem Radio Network. In the event that you're listening, this is Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth in the Oval Office gathering, cut number 17.
It's been a bad 3 weeks for the Houthis, and it's about to get worse. It's been a devastating campaign, whether it's underground facilities, weapons manufacturing, bunkers, troops in the open, air defense assets. We are not going to relent. And it's only to get more unrelenting until the Houthis declare they will stop shooting at our ships. And we've been very clear at the Iranians as well. They should not continue to provide support to the Houthis, and that message has been made very clear. So we have a lot more options and a lot more pressure to apply, and we know, because we see the reports, how devastating this campaign has been in them, and we will not relent.
It's been a bad 3 weeks for the Houthis, and it's about to get worse. Thank you, Secretary Pete. Back to President Trump talking about tariffs, cut number 18.
Do you expect any of these deals to be made before April 9th? And secondly, there have been some mixed messages from your administration. You're talking about negotiations, and yet others in your administration are saying that these tariffs are actually permanent. What is that?
Well, they can both be true. There can be permanent tariffs, and there can also be negotiations, because there are things that we need beyond tariffs. We need open borders. You know, we almost had a deal with China where we're going to open up China. It was almost done. Some of you remember it during my first term, and it was very disappointing. We ended up making a great deal. $50 billion worth of product was sold. $50 billion. You'd like that in Israel. And I made that deal, but it wasn't the deal that I wanted. It was the deal that I wanted was that, plus they were going to open up China so that our companies could go into China and compete with other countries and China for for a large number of people. And at the very end, that deal was terminated, and we went to a piece of the deal. And there are a lot of things outside of tariffs, but tariffs are very important. But there are a lot of things like opening up countries that were totally closed. China's essentially a closed country. In fact, it is a closed country. And what they do is they charge tariffs so that if you sell cars or if you sell anything, nobody's going to buy it because the price is out of control. But that's true with a lot of other countries also. So we're going to get fair deals and good deals with every country. And if we don't, we're going to have nothing to do with them. They're not going to be allowed to participate in the United States.
And that goes, especially, the president said, for the European Union, cut number 19.
The European Union's been very bad to us. They don't take our cars, like Japan in that sense. They don't take our agricultural product. They don't take anything practically. And yet they send millions of cars in a year, Mercedes-Benz, Volkswagen, BMWs. They're sending millions and millions of cars into the U.S., but we don't have a car that's been sold to the European Union or other places, but let's go for the European Union. And it's not going to be that way. It's got to be fair, reciprocal. It's got to be fair. It's not fair.
It's not fair. And the head of the European Union was offering a peace branch today. I will say the market was way off its lows. In fact, it's a mixed market today, which was a big surprise to everyone who thought the sky was falling. Dow was off 0.91%. The S&P down 0.23%. The NASDAQ actually went up 0.1%. That makes it a mixed market. Gold finished at $2,991. So if you called Nick Grovich last hour, you pay a little bit less for your gold than if you call him this hour. But the market is it's a worldwide 24/7, 365 market. Nick knows what it is. That's an extra special call out for AmericanFederal.com at 1-800-264. I got to get the number right because I didn't have it in front of me. 1-800-221-7694. 800-221-7694. Back to President Trump. Now he's talking about how we're going to save money with our debt. Cut number 20.
I mean, we're cutting prices because prices got so high people couldn't live. I mean, the prices for groceries, the prices for standard groceries, standard things were going through the roof. They couldn't live. And now those prices are coming down. So call them groceries, but that's down, energy's down, and interest rates are down. Everything's down. And the interest rates, the beauty there is when we refinance debt, debt's become such a big factor in this country. We're going to start paying debt off with tariffs and other things. But it's such a big factor because the interest rate's so high. Well, now that's coming way down. So our budget's going to look a lot better because interest costs are way down. And I guess I've done that.
And he had one more longer cut that we've got already. Cut number 21. This is the big vision from President Trump minutes ago.
It would be nice to serve a nice, easy term, but we have an opportunity to change the fabric of our country. We have an opportunity to reset the table on trade. We lose billions of dollars. We lose close to $2 trillion a year on trade. We lose $1 trillion a year to China. $1 trillion. We lose hundreds of billions of dollars a year on trade to China. We lose hundreds of billions of dollars overall, probably close to $2 trillion. Why would we do that? Number one, why would we do that? And then you have to say, is it sustainable? Then you hear about all of the people that say, well, deficits. If we have a deficit with the country, or if the country has a big surplus with us, like China has a massive surplus, that they take and they spend on their military. Well, we don't want that. I don't want them to take $500, $600 billion a year and spend it on their military. I don't want them spending money on their military. And I shouldn't have to spend money. We shouldn't have to spend it either. Because, hopefully, and I said this to President Xi, hopefully it's money that we're never going to use. In other words, because we're not going to use those incredible weapons that we have and that they have. We don't want that. So it's going to be very interesting. It's the only chance our country will have to reset the table. Because no other president would be willing to do what I'm doing or to even go through it. Now, I don't mind going through it because I see a beautiful picture at the end. But we are making tremendous progress with a lot of countries, and the countries that really took advantage of us are now saying, please negotiate. You know why? Because they're getting beaten badly because of what's happening. They're getting beaten badly. They're being devalued as countries. But it's the only chance we're going to have to reset the table on trade. And when we do, we're going to come out unbelievably well. We're going to have a strong country economically again. And we're going to have those factories that are empty all over the United States. We've lost 90,000 plants and factories. Think of this. 90,000, you wouldn't think it's possible. 90,000 plants and factories since NAFTA, which was, by the way, the worst trade deal ever developed, ever had by any country anywhere, NAFTA.
All right, so one more cut from President Trump. I wish you are close to TV and can watch this on the Salem News Channel because the body language of Prime Minister Netanyahu is very interesting. I mean, he cares about trade. He mostly cares about Iran. So he is nodding vigorously on the trade stuff and not so much on the Iran stuff. Cut number 22.
I will say this. Virtually every country wants to negotiate. If I didn't do what I did over the last couple of weeks, you wouldn't have anybody wants to negotiate. We would have gone to these countries, you want to talk? And they were, well, we don't want to talk. Now they're coming to us. They're offering things like even Bibi, and this is unrelated because it's a different kind of a relationship. But he started off our conversation today that he's cutting all of the tariffs. He's cutting everything. He's going to get down to a free base. He's going to do things that, in all fairness, other countries, if they said that, would have never even thought about doing it. Now they're offering things to us that we would have never even thought of asking them for because they're experiencing a lot of hurt. And the hurt is that they've taken advantage of us and we finally fought back. Tariffs will make this country very rich. We're rich anyway, but we're rich in a certain way. We have $36 trillion in debt. I want to get rid of it, and we can do it quickly with proper deals. So when countries don't allow us to sell our product, but we allow them to sell their product, when they charge us massive amounts of money for the privilege of going into their country, those days are over.
And by the way, Ursula von der Leyen, the head of the EU, already telegraphed what they're going to do, cut number 12.
These tariffs come first and foremost at immense costs for U.S. consumers and businesses. But at the same time, they have a massive impact on the global economy. Especially hard hit are the developing countries. And this is a major turning point for the United States. Nonetheless, we stand ready to negotiate with the United States. Indeed, we have offered 0 for 0 tariffs for industrial
What a
goods.
surprise. What a difference a weekend makes. This is a turning point for the United States, but let's do a deal. I think maybe Donald Trump, maybe he overshot the mark with the intention of coming back, but he sure did bring the EU around in a hurry, and Israel. If you're listening on the Salem Radio Network or the Salem News Channel, watching on the Salem News Channel, welcome. Stick around next hour. Douglas Murray will be here for the entire hour. I've already laid down the interview, and I'll play it for you then. The Dodgers went to the White House today, and I don't like the Dodgers. Nobody likes the Dodgers. Well, Androzek likes the Dodgers, right? Nobody else likes the Dodgers. I mean, nobody. LA doesn't even like the Dodgers. They leave it like in the fourth inning. And so, but they're very classy, and they all came. Nobody boycotted it. But because it's the California franchise, they invited Senator Adam Schiff and Senator Alex Padilla to go to the White House as well. Classic Donald Trump at the reception for the Dodgers, cut number 10.
Congratulations, Brian. And others, we have a couple of senators here. I just don't particularly like them, so I won't introduce. Over the course of this amazing season, the members of this team.
You know, athletes do this to each other, right? So they get it. This is talking trash. And it's kind of par for the course. I'm sure some of you will be watching the championship tonight. Those guys are not exchanging niceties when they're talking to each other on the court. And I've got Senator Cotton right now. Senator Cotton joins me. If you'd been at the White House, they might not have introduced you either because you're a Red Sox fan, Senator.
Well, I was pleased to join the Red Sox in 2019 to celebrate their great 2018 World Championship, just like I'm looking forward to joining them next year in 2026 to celebrate this year's World Series championship when they no doubt beat the Dodgers in the World Series.
Well, if that happens, I might cheer because nobody liked the Dodgers. Senator, I want to talk to you about two things. The fact that the president announced today we are in direct negotiations with Iran. You are the chief skeptic of all things Iran. Do you know who we sent to the table? Did you get a chance to talk to them to caution them against beware of Greeks bearing gifts?
Well, Hugh, thank you for the kind words about being the chief skeptic of Iran, but I'm not sure I can claim the title, or at least claim the title alone, because I think Donald Trump deserves it as well. In fact, the very first conversation I ever had with Donald Trump was in the late spring of 2015. He's just starting out as a candidate, and I was fighting against Barack Obama's ill-advised nuclear deal with Iran, and he thanked me for my efforts on that, said he agreed with me totally, and he's never wavered in that regard. He's always said that Iran cannot be allowed to have a nuclear weapon, and he said repeatedly, publicly and privately, over the last couple months, that he can allow Iran to get a nuclear weapon. He'd like to do so with a deal, which would be better for everyone, but if we don't have a deal, there will be bombing, as he put it last week. And I know that Prime Minister Netanyahu is at the White House today, in part, I'm sure, to discuss bilateral trade relations with the president, but also to discuss this very negotiation and what a deal would look like with the Ayatollahs who have been lying about their nuclear program for decades. That deal, as you probably remember, would look like what Libya did in 2003 when Muammar Gaddafi was scared straight and he invited the United States to come in to turn over his nuclear weapons and its biological and chemical weapons for that matter, and to stop supporting terrorists. And eventually, although Muammar Gaddafi had a lot of blood of Americans on his hands, he did come in from the cold, and we lifted sanctions on Libya. We removed them from the list of state sponsors of terrorism, and they became a de facto ally. That's what a complete and verifiable nuclear deal looks like.
Any idea who is doing our talking for us?
Q, I have some idea. I'm not sure the president has disclosed that, though. Maybe he has, but I think I'll keep that just between myself and the president for the time being. Remember, what matters in the end is not so much who sits down at the table, but rather what Donald Trump decides to do. And as far as I'm concerned, I don't think he's put a foot wrong yet in the Middle East. We've been finally hitting back at a bunch of outlaw rebels in Yemen who are just another terrorist proxy for Iran. That's long overdue. Joe Biden left our sailors like sitting ducks in the Red Sea, and Donald Trump very sensibly said, if you shoot at us, we're going to hit back many times harder. And he said, if you stop shooting at us, then we'll stop shooting back at you. But this is another important part of degrading Iran's ability to target the United States and target our friends in Israel and the Arab Gulf nations.
In the room with the president, when they were talking with Prime Minister Netanyahu and his team, are Vice President Vance, Secretary Rubio, Secretary Hegseth, and National Security Advisor Waltz. These are not the people you bring along for the tariff discussion, though I'm sure Secretary Lutnick is around there and Peter Navarro and everybody else. Those are the people that you bring around to talk about Iran. Am I right?
Yeah, Hugh, that's right. And also just based on our trading relationship with Israel, I mean, Israel used to be a very high tariff, very highly regulated country with lots of non-tariff trade barriers. That's a throwback to their old labor days, where they were semi-socialist nation. Thanks to Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's tenure as finance minister, in between his tenures as prime minister, though, Israel significantly reformed its economic policies and trade policies. It's unleashed, the rapid economic growth of Israel, and Israel is one of our best, in many cases, fairest trading partners. So I do expect, although the trade was on the agenda, that this is primarily a security discussion because, as President Trump has said, we're coming to the end game with Iran. They're just months, maybe weeks away from enough enriched uranium to have sufficient amounts for at least a testable, if not a deliverable nuclear weapon. And they're only probably 2 or 3 years away from having missiles that could hit us here in the United States. So this is not just an Israel problem. This is a United States problem. The threat is imminent.
So last question, Senator. In the book Fight, it was revealed, and it was confirmed by Prime Minister Netanyahu in an Israeli interview in Hebrew last week, that Team Biden got further and further away from Israel, and the division between Israel and the United States deepened over the course of the growing cognitive and physical infirmity of the president. Do the people who were soft on Iran, are you satisfied they are out of the government now? The people that we were worried about who are absolutely soft on Iran, are they gone?
Well, yeah, Joe Biden, first off.
Yeah.
He's the number one person gone, and a lot of his senior aide. I'm sure, Hugh, there's still some bureaucrats, maybe even some low-level Trump appointees who don't agree with the president. But I think everybody should take their cues from what the president has said. And he's been consistent going back a decade that he will not allow Iran to have a nuclear weapon.
Now, Pete Hegseth said the Houthi had a bad 3 weeks. It's about to get worse. I mean, we sent A-10s over there. Can you imagine using A-10s in Yemen?
Yeah, it has been a very bad run for these rebels in Yemen, who, again, are Iran's terrorist proxy. They've been shooting at Israel. They've been shooting at our sailors. This is one more step in our efforts, not just to protect our people, protect our allies, but to degrade Iran's terrorist proxies. So they can't do that anymore. And if it does take military action to stop Iran from getting nuclear weapons, that's one less deterrent that Iran will have, just like Israel has done such an amazing job of devastating Hezbollah and Hamas's war-making capabilities.
Thank you so much, Senator. We'll excuse you with your Red Sox fixation for that, so long as you don't cheer for the Dodgers. You know I'm carried across New Hampshire on some great radio stations up there, and many people watching the Salem News Channel up there as well. I want this one for all you folks in New Hampshire. Donald Trump was talking about your former governor, Chris Sununu, on Air Force One yesterday, and I agree with him. Cut number 6.
Tells you the power of tariffs, right?
President, former New Hampshire Governor Chris Sununu is saying that he'll win the open Senate seat in New Hampshire and that he has no doubt you'll support him if he runs. Is that true?
True. I told him. He came to my office, came to the Oval Office, and met with Chris Sununu, and I support him fully. I hope he runs. He's been very nice to me over the last year or so. But no, I hope he runs. I think he'll win that seat.
Sir,
I think he'll run away with that seat. I am so glad that that is going to happen because it also will help Susan Collins so that there won't be, every ad won't be anti-Susan Collins. Now, St. Susan, as we like to call her, is going to win handily in Maine. I don't know if they can even find anyone to run against her. Janet Mills is a boy should play girl sports person, and that kind of ends that race before it started. But every Republican is looking great. The only two that pro-democratic handicappers think are in danger are Susan Collins, and she's not, and Tom Tillis in North Carolina, and he's not. But Chris Sununu would flip New Hampshire. There's a good chance in Michigan. There's a good chance in Minnesota. There's a very good chance in Georgia if Governor Kemp gets in against John Oso. I wish I could remember your name. I can't. But, off what? Off-White? John Off-White?
Ossoff.
John Off the Record?
Yes, that guy.
That guy.
Ossoff.
John Oshkosh. John Oshkosh. He makes kids jumpers.
By
John
gosh.
Oshkosh. Then the president on Air Force One just wanted to make sure people were clear on MS-13, cut number 7.
Biden allowed millions of people to come in, and if they find one, now I will tell you, the one, somebody said he's a member of MS-13, not Tren de Aragua. He's a member of MS-13, and therefore he should immediately be brought back. Well, MS-13 is just as bad as Tren de Aragua. So they say, oh, we made a mistake because he's not with them, he's with MS-13. Bring him back, bring him back. MS-13 is a very bad group.
Sir, how could
maybe as bad.
Tren de Aragua. Did you hear how he said that? Tren de Aragua. Now I know how to pronounce it. If I had a producer pronounce things like that, I would be able to do this. Cut number 9.
Which is what it should be.
Is there a Trump put though? Is there pain in the market at some point? You're unwilling to tolerate this idea of a Trump put. Is there a threshold?
I think your question is so stupid. I mean, I think it's I don't want anything to go down, but sometimes you have to take medicine to fix something.
You can't see me with my, unless you're watching on the Salem News Channel, you can't see me with my head in the hands. Don't ask a dumb question. Don't ask a, don't do that. Here's Marco Rubio at the NATO presser on Friday talking about the tariffs, cut number 14.
And they are now.
No, their economies are not crashing. The markets are reacting. No, their economies are not crashing. Their markets are reacting to a dramatic change in the global order in terms of trade. And so what happens is pretty straightforward. If you're a company and you make a bunch of your products in China, and all of a sudden shareholders or people that play the stock market realize that it's going to cost a lot more to produce in China, your stock is going to go down. But ultimately, the markets, as long as they know what the rules are going to be moving forward, and as long as that's set and you can sustain where you're going to be, the markets will adjust. Businesses around the world, including in trade and global trade, they just need to know what the rules are. Once they know what the rules are, they will adjust to those rules. So I don't think it's fair to say economies are crashing. Markets are
He's
crashing.
so right.
Markets
And the NASDAQ went up a little bit today, and the other ones went down. So it's a mixed market. Markets are not crashing. Traders got caught out not believing Trump. You should believe Trump when he says things. And not be a trader unless you really are prepared for bad days and good days.
I'm your huckleberry.
Welcome back, America. I'm Hugh Hewitt on the Salem News Channel, Salem Radio Network. I don't know who Vic Mattis's huckleberry is. I'm not sure he would say that Mary Catherine Ham was his huckleberry or not. Dwayne's not my huckleberry. Dwayne's not even my producer. Do you have a huckleberry, Vic?
Oh, do I have a huckleberry? I don't know. Would that be my my better half? Would that be my wife, Kate? Is that the required answer?
Kate's not going to gun into a gunfight with you. She's going to take the kids and run. That's not a huckleberry. Someone going in a gunfight with you, right?
Oh, well, then it would definitely be Mary Catherine.
There you go. I think she'd actually know how to use the weaponry. Dwayne and I are
She's very
hopeless.
good
We
with
haven't
a gun.
got huckleberries. I have not yet listened to your Huckleberry show, and I'm actually kind of amazed that you're talking, because I listened to last Tuesday's show, and it sounded like Mary Catherine was choking you and pouring sand down your throat, and you had what I had, and I said, he's not going to be there next. Don't even think about it, Mary Catherine. Get a guest host now, but you're back.
Yeah, I am back. It was, I wasn't sure if it was going to be sounding like myself or if I was going to be sounding like Harvey Firestein at this point. But I'm glad that it's just me at this point. So, it's such a weird flu that, the magic of editing allowed me to pause and, get through some hacking coughs to spare the listeners. But it was pretty tough to get through 2 episodes last week.
I can't lift this up. On my desk is something called the cough drop. It's an electrical device that requires highly qualified technicians to hit. But whenever I'm using it and then I go like that, you don't hear me because I can cough. I can clear my throat. You don't have a cough drop in the studio of Getting Hammered?
No, that would be something for, I think, producer Phil that he would handle after it. I've seen those before with the heavy mics and you have that little button to cough. We don't have that in our latest iteration.
It's a very useful thing. It's very, very useful. Now, tell me a little bit about the postmortem on Val Kilmer. I mean, Tombstone is his greatest movie. And I just heard a no from my non-producer. What do you think is his greatest movie?
There are so many. Yeah. Oh, wow. Dwayne says Real Genius. It's such an endearing movie because of the time that it came out. And it's funny, Hugh, I don't know if you've seen it.
I
but
haven't.
It's the idea, this would drive you nuts. It's the idea that, a bunch of young kids who are, geniuses at basically Caltech discover that their university is working with the Pentagon to develop successfully the Strategic Defense Initiative. And they decide to sabotage it because it would be a dangerous thing. It was such a movie of that time, but it's quite charming when you look back on it.
So it's kind of a premonition of Doge. Is that what it is? Only sort of a reverse Doge?
That's right. But when you see a movie like Real Genius, you only wish that Star Wars was that successful at the time, that it could, a laser beam to eliminate enemies in the Soviet Union. But of course, it was never that far along. But no, I think he's great in that. I think he's great, obviously, in Tombstone and, of course, Top Gun, both movies, and the movie Heat, directed by Michael Mann. But it's really, really endearing and poignant if you go back and look at his final scene in Top Gun Maverick. Not a dry eye in the house.
I will do that. I still just I'm your Huckleberry. Now, Vic, what I really wanted to ask you about, you're not as old as I am, and you're not as young as Mary Catherine, and you're not as young as some of the people listening who are in college. I have told my kids, I went through 87 Black Friday. I'd begun to invest by 1987. I was doing the thrift savings plan in the government. Mm-hmm. I went through the dot-com bust. I went through the 9/11 market crash. I went through the 2007, 2008, just absolute chaos in the markets, including a liquidity freeze. Went through the COVID shutdown. And I like to quote from Dustin Hoffman in the movie Wag the Dog. This is nothing. It really is nothing. And it's over. Do you agree with me or disagree with me?
Well, I'm a little nervous, Hugh. I mean, I do remember 1987. I was in high school at the time, but I remember it being fascinated because they called it, I guess, Black Monday or whatever it was, or Black Friday at the time. And they said, this is the worst thing since the Depression. But of course, in the grand scheme of things, it wasn't. And I remember going through the 92 recession, which was a very mild recession. And more interestingly, of course, was the disaster of 2008 when the housing bubble burst and everything fell through, Bear Stearns, et cetera. But this is a very uncertain time. And my biggest concern is the uncertainty in policy that's leading a lot of consumers to quite possibly pull back. And if they pull back and they decide that they don't want to spend and they alter those change their spending habits, then that can have adverse effects on the market. I'm all for targeted tariffs, certainly China among others, but other countries I'm kind of puzzled by, and sort of this broad sweeping plan But the president was just with Netanyahu today and talking about countries coming back to the table. There are trade agreements in place. I hope they could stick to those agreements.
Let me
there's
ask you,
something-
Vic. I may be immune to these tariffs, with one exception. I don't like bananas, so I'm not going to get hit by the banana tax. I do drink coffee, and I can't get any cheaper than Kirtland, right? I think that's the cheapest coffee you can buy, the Costco brand. And I buy cheap. I never go to Starbucks, that sort of thing. Can you get hit by a tariff?
Yeah, on so many levels, I think. Well, I mean, where do the coffee beans come from, right? I mean, they got to come from, places like Colombia or Costa Rica, abroad. And there's going to be, an impact to that quite possibly. Of course, I like my champagne and scotch.
Oh, now
That
we
is
get
going
to the,
French
now
wine.
we understand. It's
Yeah,
the
my
drinkers.
feelings about this. Yeah,
Now
drinkers are going to
it's
have an
the-
impact.
The snob tax.
It's a snob tax. That's what Dwayne just
Right.
said. It's
Yeah,
a snob
I heard it.
tax.
I
Oh, you
heard,
did?
but it also impacts it impacts the let's say the bourbon distillers that want to sell their products in Europe. So I mean, it's everybody across the board that makes me a little. I have no problems buying California wine. I think it's great.
Did you notice that the
and
EU
Oregon,
exempted the
Washington.
bourbon right away? The EU said, keep the
Yeah.
bourbon coming.
Yeah, that's good. And their tastes have evolved. That's also a very good sign. So again, Ursula von der Leyen, the EU Commission president, saying that they want to talk about these things. Great. Same thing with
How do you
Japan,
say
I
her
understand.
name? You're the only guy I know who can say her
Yes.
name.
The V's are like F's, Hugh. So it's Ursula von der Leyen, and she was formerly in the German government, and now she's here.
Oh, it's just great. The Germans are running the EU as well as Germany. It's just great.
Yeah.
Vic Mattis, I'm going to be listening to the latest edition of Getting Hammered today. Thank you. Everyone should. Mary Catherine and Vic do a great podcast. Go like and subscribe to Getting Hammered. Coming up next hour, Douglas Murray joins me. You can listen on the Salem Radio Network. You can listen at home. You can watch it on the Salem News Channel. Douglas and I taped it right before the show for 45 minutes. It's already posted at my YouTube channel, but we will play it so that you can watch it and listen to it. It's so important. It's a profound book, all right, on democracies and death cults, Israel and the future of civilization. I read it on Friday and Sunday, and I took my notes this morning, got up early and made my outline, had a wonderful conversation with a brilliant public intellectual author and writer. He writes for the New York Post. He writes for the Free Press. Do not miss Douglas Murray talking about that. One more clip I want to play for you is Kevin Hassett. Kevin Hassett is on Fox and Friends this morning talking about trade deals, cut number 13.
The president has made it clear that this policy, he believes, will help American workers. And there's a reason why he believes that, because policies like this in his last term did help American workers. After really 2 decades of no real wage growth in the U.S., we got more than $6,000 per family after we had tariffs and tax cuts and deregulation. And so he's doubling down on something that he knows works. And he's going to continue to do that, but he is also going to listen to our trading partners. And if they come to us with really great deals that advantage American manufacturing and American farmers, I'm sure he'll listen. But in the end, it's President Trump that's going to decide when a deal is good enough. And I think it's interesting that so many countries are lining up. The final thing I'd like to say is that there's so many people that keep saying, oh, it's the American consumer that's going to bear this tariff, is going to make inflation go up and so on. But if you think about it, President Trump's view is it's these countries that are sending inelastic supply to the country, and so they're going to bear the brunt of the tariffs. And if that were false, then if they didn't bear the brunt, then they'd be quiet about it, right? The fact that they're all angry and upset and sending retaliation our way, it suggests that President Trump is right, that they bear the tariffs. So if they're worried about bearing the tariff, that would explain their behavior. It's not the American consumer.
So if you're saying that he's waiting on great deals and 50 countries have already come to the table, have any of them been great deals, good enough for him to negotiate with?
I've seen some deals that are great, and President Trump is going to decide if they're great enough. But again, after decades and decades of mistreating American workers, it's going to be tough to get him to decide to really come to the table and sign on the dotted line. But when he does, he's going to sign with that big, long, beautiful signature, and he'll have made a great deal for America.
I love Kevin Hassett. He's always happy, and for an economist, you can usually understand him. That's not always a given when an economist starts talking about trade barriers, VAT, reciprocal tariffs, etc. I have one opinion on this. Talk to me in 6 months and I'll tell you what I think. Nobody knows. Nobody knows. Nobody knows. And market traders are going to trade. They're going to panic. They panicked on Thursday and Friday. They didn't panic today. Might be a dead cat bounce, as they say in technical terms. Maybe they'll panic again tomorrow. But as I said to Vic Mattis, been there and done that 5 times. Now, do not go anywhere. Douglas Murray joins me. If you can, go watch on the Salem News Channel, because Douglas Murray is very expressive. But if you can't, just listen right here on the Salem Radio Network, and you will be educated. A day of great market turbulence. I want to talk about something other than that. I want to talk with Douglas Murray, author of this brand new book on democracies and death cults. It's really quite profound. The subtitle tells you everything. Israel and the Future of Civilization. Douglas Murray is a writer and an author for the New York Post and the Free Press, and he joins me. Congratulations, Douglas. This is quite the book. I hope it's being received well outside of the world of the fanatics and the killers who must not like it at all.
Well, it's very good to be with you, Hugh. I'm a great admirer of the show and a great listener to you, and it's wonderful to be on. Yes, I actually launched the book at Columbia University on Friday of last week. And that was obviously very deliberate and pointed, but it was actually a rather wonderful occasion. As you know, President Trump has threatened to withdraw federal funding from colleges like Columbia, which have allowed supporters of the death cults of Hamas to just parade around university freely for the last 18 months, chanting anti-Americanism, anti-Israel activity, chasing Jewish students across campus, and much more. But it was rather wonderful, I have to say, to speak to some of the good students and professors at Columbia. You'll notice, I'm sure as I have, that in the last year and a half, all the people in our country here in America who support Hamas simultaneously wear kafirs and other bits of Palestinian terrorist chic, and also pretend to be very scared of the COVID-19 virus because they're always masked up. They always hide themselves wherever they can. And that's because I think they know that they're doing something deeply shameful. And then most of them are actually, to some extent, I think, embarrassed by it. There are some fanatics who aren't, but there are many who realize that perhaps it's not the best look to be on the side of rapists and murderers and beheaders and kidnappers and much more.
I am hopeful that On Democracies and Death Cults actually advances the argument with the students. At one point towards the close of the book, you ask rhetorically, what will it take for these students to realize it's not a game? But let me begin with your very first line. Sometimes a flare goes up and you get to see exactly where everyone is standing. It's a beautiful line. You also get to see who's a giant and who's a hero, and you get to see the orcs and the demons. You spend a lot of time on both the evil and the good. I want to start with Ben Shimoni, because of all of the extraordinary stories that are interspersed throughout the arc of your point, his really hit me. He was at the Nova party. He drove out twice. He saved 9 people. He went back a 3rd time. He talked to his girlfriend, Jessica Miranda Elter. He said he would come back. He got 9 out alive. He did not come back. The killers got him and other passengers in his car. Did his girlfriend speak with you? Did any of the 9 that he saved speak with you?
Yes. I spoke to his girlfriend and other survivors. This book, I say, if I'd have included all the stories of heroism and just incredible bravery that I've heard in the last 18 months in Israel, it would have been 100 times the length. But yes, that story is incredibly moving to me, because it's an example of the fact that there's a young man who risked his life not once or twice, but 3 times to get other young people of his age out from this moment when the terrorists went into the Nova music party, the dance party, in the early hours of the morning. It was just an unimaginable, to most of us, act of savagery. They raped people, they murdered, mutilated, tortured, and kidnapped. And here is just one story, but one of the most moving to me, of somebody who knew that he could save lives in the middle of this moment when Hamas were intent on taking so many young lives, and did. And he went back again and again to save lives. And, as you say, I mean, it's very important to focus on the evil that was done that day. But I think it's also important to focus on the good and the unbelievably heroic good that some people did.
And the poignancy. Another story you tossed in is that Omar Ohana and Sagi Golan were to be married in 2 weeks, but both men were immediately recalled to the units. They both went, they stayed in touch, but one did not survive. Sagi died. And Ivry Lidar, I'm not familiar with his music, was supposed to sing at their wedding. He sang at the funeral of Sagi. I find that, there are 1,200 dead, 5,000 wounded, tens of thousands of family members. You could do stories forever. So obviously the writer's dilemma here is which ones do you use, Douglas Murray?
Yes. Well, I've tried to show in the round, really, what it was like when just absolute horror, absolute evil descended that morning. And it's extremely hard to select stories from that, but I wanted to kind of epitomize to whatever extent I can as a writer the events of that terrible day and then the results afterwards. But I think that it's incredibly important, this when you're describing events is horrific, it's also so important to bring not just the magnitude of it, but also the human reality of it home. Sometimes with an atrocity like this, we throw out numbers, and that's important. But every number is a name, is a person, is a story of its own. And as I say, I could have gone on forever with the horrors. But also could have gone on forever with some of the heroism, which I recount, and I do it in part not just to provide a historically accurate account of part of that day, but to pose this question to the rest of us in the West, because it's a question I've been mulling on for the last 18 months, and indeed for most of my adult life, is what do you do? What can be done in the face of people who, like Al-Qaeda, like ISIS and others, taunt us with their love of death, their desire for death, their longing for death. And what do we do with a group that, like Hassan Nasrallah, the late leader of Hezbollah, said many years ago? He said in a speech, our enemies, the Westerners, the Americans, the Israelis, he said they love life and this is their weakness. And we can take advantage of that weakness because we love death. But as I say in the book, there is an answer to that, and it's exemplified not least in some of the extraordinary heroes I interviewed for this book.
Now, I'll tell the audience, I read it in 2 sittings on Friday and Sunday. Took a day off in between to think about it. And the arc of the book seemed to me to begin with the utter awful horror and then to build towards a hopeful ending about whether or not the West can rally around the love of life and living life fully to defeat the cult of death. But there are a couple of lessons along the way. I want to go to the first one. Hubris was the great enemy of Israel. And you mentioned Fauda. You also mentioned the Iron Dome. I love the scene with the old guy slamming the vodka down, say, yes or no, Iron Dome is a good idea. It's a disease that America might have too. We don't think that Pearl Harbor can happen to us again when in fact it can. We imagine ourselves sort of distanced from all this stuff even after 9/11. Do you think the Israelis are over hubris for a long time, if not ever?
I think they certainly were before the 7th, for sure, and before 6:30 a.m. on the 7th, when the first missiles started to come through, thousands of missiles fired from Gaza into Israel. I think there was, undoubtedly, the country was caught sleeping. It was the 50th anniversary of the surprise invasion of the Yom Kippur War, and so you might think, well, focus on these anniversaries, remember it. But 50 years, a half a century, is a sort of it's such a long time in the Western mindset. It's not a long time in the jihadist or death cult mindset, but it is in ours. And if you look at what Israel was doing in the year before the 7th, the country, it's almost biblical. the country was tearing itself apart over an issue of judicial reforms that some people think are necessary, some people are very critical of. Lots of Israelis were out on the streets of Tel Aviv every weekend protesting against the government's reforms. I quote in the book one man who said to me, ironically and darkly, he said, Hamas were stupid. If they'd left us a few more months, we'd have all killed each other. But they were, as I say, it's almost biblical. It is biblical that the nation was so divided and it was tearing itself apart. And then the horror descended and it reminded everybody of what is actually out there and what matters.
Let's pause right there for a moment. It is very biblical. Everyone did what was right in their own eyes. They demonstrated for what they thought was right in their own eyes during the run-up to 10/7. But then, as Douglas Murray recounts on Democracies and Death Cults, they came together. They're divided still, but they came together. What's it tell the West? We continue our conversation after the break. Return to the Salem News Channel to watch it or to the Salem Radio Network to listen to it. Douglas Murray is an amazing public intellectual. He's the author of the brand new book on Democracies and Death Cults. Let's continue my conversation with Douglas Murray.
Yes, I mean, demonstrably, obviously, provably, on the morning, Israel was unprepared for an attack of this scale, sophistication, and brutality. And I hope that it doesn't lose the memory of that, and I don't think it will.
Now, the difference between 9/11 and 10/7 is Americans could tell themselves that everyone was in caves in Afghanistan and 19 people got through, and only 19. On 10/7, thousands of people came through the fence. Many of them were Hamas terrorists, other of them were civilian killers, but thousands of them. And you try and trace the bacillus of Nazism to the Grand Mufti. Now, on this program, this audience has heard a lot about the Grand Mufti because Larry Arnn, president of Hillsdale College, has frequently mentioned his relationship with Hitler and how Churchill understood that. He got away to Egypt, and he passed this bacillus on. Do you think Americans quite understand that this is a fusion of religious fanaticism and it's just Nazi ideology 2.0?
It's not just Americans. Nobody in the world really understands this. Even in the Middle East, even in Israel, many people don't, I think, understand this particular corner of it, which is that, as I say in the book, that one of the things about what happened in 1945 and the defeat of Nazism was that Nazism and Nazi anti-Semitism was comprehensively defeated in two ways. It was defeated on the battlefield, but it was also shown to be utterly, utterly defeated in the realm of ideas. In other words, at the end of the war, the people who had fueled this toxic anti-Semitism, and as everyone knows, the thing with anti-Semitism is that it shows up the weakness across the rest of society. Once you start getting into anti-Semitic conspiracies, everything else follows. It's a sign of societal breakdown. And when the war ended in 45, the people who had fueled that virus in Germany, in Nazi Germany and across the continent, they were either tried and hanged or tried and imprisoned. And the ones who escaped scuttled like rats out of Europe and hid under false names in South America. In other words, it was defeated. There is one corner of this that, as I say in the book, people really need to realize, which is that the one place in the world where somebody who was part of that Nazi anti-Semitic ideology returned home and was welcomed openly as a victor and a hero was the Muslim world, the Arab world. When the Grand Mufti gets back to Egypt in 1946, Egyptian public radio welcomes him. And they say, this is a man who set up his own SS unit, went to Adolf Hitler, as you and your listeners know, and said, I want to set up my own SS group to clear the Jews out of the Middle East. This man who did that returns home to Egypt in 1946, and Egyptian public radio says, the scourge of the Jews, the lion of the Muslims has returned to us. And very often in recent years, I've wondered, why is it the case that the one place in the world where, Mein Kampf is routinely found in bookshops, and not as a historical artifact, but as a kind of to-do manual for today, is in the Arab and Muslim world. Why is it the case? Why is it the case that so many of the soldiers coming out of Gaza and the IDF just daily find anti-Semitic Nazi filth in house after house? And it's because this is the one place in the world where this vicious strain of ideology still lives. And I believe that until that is defeated as well, there is no prospect of peace any more than there would have been if, worship of the emperor and the death cult of the emperor's followers in imperial Japan had existed after 1945. It's not enough for an ideology to simply be defeated on the battlefield. It has to also happen in the realm of ideas. In the Middle East, unfortunately, in the Muslim world, to a great extent, this bacillus, this virus, still thrives.
There is quite a lot of reflection on what the anti-Semitism of the moment means. And you borrowed from Vasily Grossman, Life and Fate. I want to read that quote. Anti-Semitism is always a means rather than an end. It is a measure of the contradictions yet to be resolved. It is the mirror for the failings of the individual social structures and state systems. Tell me, he wrote, what you accuse the Jews of, and I'll tell you what you are guilty of. You update that and edit slightly, saying, tell me what you accuse the Jews of, and I'll tell you what you believe you are guilty of. Does that apply to those students at Columbia, at Harvard, at Michigan, at UCLA, everywhere across the United States?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I'll just quickly, Grossman's brilliant insight about this is absolutely applicable today across the Middle East. Look at the Iranian revolutionary government in Tehran. It accuses Israel of being a colonialist, expansionist state. The mullahs in Tehran since 1979, when they seized control of that great country and ran it into the ground, have been colonizing not just Iran, they've been colonizing Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, Yemen. So when they accuse the Jewish state of colonialism, it is they who are the colonialists in the region. The president of Turkey, Mr. Erdogan, often refers to the colonization that he accuses Israel of, and he accuses Israel of being an occupying power. President Erdogan is the president of Turkey, which currently occupies half of Cyprus. They have occupied it for 50 years now, illegally occupying half of an EU member state whilst being in NATO themselves. So when Mr. Erdogan says that the Israelis are occupiers, he's telling us what he is. He's telling us what he is. Now, how this applies to the student protesters and others in America is something I put a lot of thought into, because in my last book, The War on the West, I wrote about this anti-American virus that has been caught in the last generation in this country, and how people, particularly at the most privileged institutions, were spreading this idea that America was just this terrible idea, that America was uniquely guilty, that America was guilty of colonialism, white supremacy, racism, slavery, and so on. They had turned into an entirely anti-Western and anti-American view of the world. And in the last 18 months, as I saw from the 7th of October onwards, as I saw here in New York on the 8th of October, where protesters in Times Square were praising the massacres of Hamas that Hamas were doing as they were going on. What I saw was these people were all accusing Israel of occupation, colonialism, genocide, white supremacy, and so on. And I thought, well, this is interesting, because this seems to me to be a version of what a psychologist would describe as projection.
Exactly correct. Let's pause it there. It is projection. He discusses it at great length in On Democracies and Death Cults. I really do think you ought to go out and order the book from Amazon right away. Get a couple, give them to your friends and family. Inoculate yourself against anti-Semitism and against stupidity about history. We'll talk about stupidity about history when we come back with Douglas Murray. I'm talking with Douglas Murray, the author of On Democracy and Death Cults. Let's pick up the conversation.
have been told, and I wondered in the war in the West what would happen with this. They've been told they, by dint of being in America in the 21st century, are guilty of these alleged crimes of America in the past, some of which nobody disputes, slavery, for instance, some of which genocide and ethnic cleansing and so on are eminently disputable. But they've been told that these are all the story of America, and they, by being Americans, are guilty of them by descent. And I said in the war on the West, this is a very dangerous position because nobody in question is guilty, and there's no one around who can accept an apology. Nobody alive either perpetrated or suffered any of these crimes where the crimes are true. So what you see in the last 18 months is certain types of students in America who believe that they can expiate the guilt they've been told they should feel by attacking Israel in the here and now for all of these things that they themselves have been told that they're guilty of. And this is a very dangerous situation, but it undoubtedly fuels this fervent, hate-filled movement, which is so disturbing and should be so disturbing to Americans everywhere.
Well, there are 4 pages of statistics in your new book, and again, I want people to get out and get on democracies and death cults about what students believe. And I wrote in my margin note, we are living in an age of stupidity. I mean, just really genuine historical illiteracy that I don't know if we can remedy. Do you think it can be remedied? Because most of these students, and I use students with air quotes, are unaware of even basic history. And Habib Reddigur likes to speak about that, but they're not going to listen to Habib. They might listen to you. They might listen to me, probably you. You're younger. But I don't know that you can undo the damage of an education system that left out. You can't put in what God left out as a line from Chariots of Fire. I don't know we can put in basic literacy to these people. Do you think we can?
I think it is possible. I'm certainly not hopeless about it. And that's partly because I think that there are very, very smart young Americans coming up, many of whom I've spoken to in recent years, who have seen through this horrible system that has been pushed on them. But it's not going to be done overnight. I'm very positive about the Trump administration's threats to withdraw federal funding from many of these universities. And I think there's an obvious place to start. As I said to the students at Columbia the other day, anything with studies in the name should almost certainly be defunded. There is no need for post-colonial studies. In fact, there's no need for Middle East studies at American universities. None of the students who study these so-called studies are really being educated in the round at all. They're being made into activists. They're being persuaded that the best use of time is to run up large amounts of debt in order to be expensively made into an illiterate who also believes some rather wicked things. And I don't think that's the best use of taxpayer dollars, to put it at its mildest. I think it can be turned around, but all these departments across university after university that have actually stated that they want to create activists, this is not what universities are for. They're not meant to be radicalization centers in which people are churned out believing that they can solve a problem they know almost nothing about. And by the way, look at I said this at Columbia the other day, look at the very way that a lot of these students who have been radicalized try to communicate. They don't communicate like you and I are communicating now. They don't exchange ideas. They don't.
Right, they certainly do not exchange ideas. Are college kids willing to listen to debate and discussion? I'm talking with Douglas Murray. By the way, the entire interview is now posted over at my YouTube channel. If you've just come into the middle of this and you see it on the Salem News Channel, you turn on Pluto and you see it. Oh, I wish I'd heard that all. It's all over at my YouTube channel. Start at the beginning, but let's go back to whether or not students are listening.
They stand outside and they chant the same thing repeatedly. Intifada, intifada, things like that. And when somebody does that, they are doing the opposite of what a university is for. Because at university, you're meant to exchange ideas, you're meant to learn, and and that's done by talking and by reading and by listening. But the opposite of that is chanting, because chanting is an attempt not to persuade somebody. Nobody says, oh, the 20th time you've called for an intifada. I agree. Yeah, I get it the first 19 times. Nobody says that. The point of the chanting is not to persuade, it's to intimidate and to browbeat. It's to make you acquiesce in their demands. That is an anti-education movement, and it should be identified as such. And I'm very happy if those departments that have encouraged that kind of non-communication go to the dust.
I want to ask you, because you've had a lot of experience with the fanatics, Douglas Murray, and I've seen you on BBC take apart some of the stupid people. In the United States, speech is protected by the Brandenburg test. I've been teaching con law for almost 30 years. And for speech to be punishable, it has to not only have the explicit purpose of causing violence, but have the present ability to do so. It seems to me a lot of the pro-evil demonstrations past that line in the sand, but we have not yet resolved to end those kinds of speeches by denying them the parade permits that they need, even though it often ends up in violence. Do you think we ought to go in that direction?
You know, as listeners can tell, I'm from Britain, and there's a different standard in the UK. There are laws, for instance, against the glorification of terrorism. That said, those laws are not followed. The police all too rarely actually go for people guilty of that. They can arrest housewives for writing something critical of the police on Instagram and so on. But many of the people who are actually terrorist supporters get away with it. Of course, there's a different standard in the US. But I've been rather struck by some of the debate on this in recent weeks, because it seems to me there's several things, and you know this much better than I do. But the first thing is that, of course, the protections that an American citizen has are different from the protections that somebody, for instance, coming to the US on a green card or a visa has.
Correct.
And I think that Secretary Rubio was absolutely right the other week when he said in a press conference, you know, if you've come to the United States and you've pretended to us you're coming to study, but actually you spend your time inciting violence on campus and saying you want to overthrow the government and the system of the country you're in, maybe America doesn't really need you here. Maybe, you know, you should use your talents back in your home country to stir up the dissent there. And I think a lot of people in recent weeks have failed to realize the difference between those two things. If I went to study in France and used my time not to study, but to call for the complete overthrow of the French government and the French system and the Western system as a whole, I'd be surprised if the French remained very welcoming to me. And so I think there's just a sane society doesn't need to import lots more people who want to overthrow the society. So I think there is a different speech standard there. The second thing I'd say about this is, and I said this to somebody I was debating the other day rather vociferously on this, the podcaster Andrew Sullivan, I said to him, when he and others have been very vocal about how terrible they think it is that one of the organizers of the Columbia demonstrations, whose organization said that their aim is the complete destruction of Western civilization, when he was detained by ICE, and he's going to go through due process, he's due to go to a court in New Jersey to see whether or not he broke the rules of his green card and so on. I'm keen that people have that debate, and I think that it's useful and fruitful. But I would be much more interested in it if the people making such a free speech hero of him talked more about, for instance, 21-year-old Eden Alexander from New Jersey, coincidentally, who has spent the last 18 months actually in captivity, actually kidnapped, tortured, held hostage, denied every right by Hamas in Gaza, where they have held him for the last 18 months as a hostage. And all the people who are leaping out to defend the pro-Hamas people, I wish that they had spent any of the last 18 months talking about Americans and others who were actually kidnapped, have actually been detained and had all of their rights withdrawn. And I can't help noticing the unbelievable double standard that people are exercising here.
Douglas Murray, one of the amazing parts of the book is that you retrace the steps of Yahya Sinwar as he dies, and you enter into Rafah, and you are not disguising the destruction that is everywhere and 360 degrees all around you. Do you think if you could have questioned Sinwar, he would have thought it was worth it? Because and is this scale of destruction and defeat going to set back the bacillus significantly in your view?
Sinwar, who was, of course, as you know, the planner of the 7th of October massacres, was eventually tracked down and killed in under a year after October the 7th. And yes, I spent a lot of time in Gaza, Lebanon, as well as Israel in the last year and a half researching this. I was embedded with the IDF.
Well, let's pause it there. We have 3 minutes left. The entire interview is already posted at my YouTube channel. So gather around the YouTube TV tonight and go find the Hugh Hewitt channel and listen to Douglas Murray. I don't know of any non-Israeli reporter who has spent more time in Israel since 10/7 other than Douglas Murray. I think he's done it more and done it better than anybody else. If you've missed today interview with Douglas Murray on either the radio or the Salem News Channel, I've posted it in its entirety, and there's some that didn't make it onto the programs over at my YouTube channel. But let's finish. We're talking about Sinwar and how Douglas Murray retraced the steps of his final steps.
After the death of Sinwar, after he was eventually found and killed, I went in actually with the battalion who'd found him. And the only reason he cropped up in Rafah, right in the south of Gaza, was because he had nowhere else to run. And that was a result of very hard fighting by the young men and women of the IDF through Gaza, often house to house, against this terrorist army that, as everyone knows, embeds themselves in civilian buildings, dresses in civilian clothes, and flouts every rule of war. After a year, there was nowhere else for Sinwar to run. You know, it's a very interesting thing. I spoke at one of the reunions of the Nova Party survivors. I spoke to a very brilliant woman who was a therapist who was working with some of the survivors who are understandably suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder and much more. And this woman said to me when I was describing some of the Hamas as psychopaths, she said, "Remember, Douglas, that there's a difference between a psychopath and a sociopath." She said, in the trade, it's believed that psychopaths are probably born, but sociopaths are made. Oh. Now, Sinwar was almost certainly a psychopath. He was in Israeli jails in the 2000s for throttling to death Palestinians with his own hands. He was a bloody killer and almost certainly a psychopath. But what he did in the years after he was released from Israeli prisons and planned the 7th and killed many Palestinians as well as Israelis, what he did was that he helped create a generation of sociopaths in Gaza. Hamas, remember, had 18 years to govern the Gaza. 18 years. That is the time from, as I say in the book, the birth of a child to the end of their formal education. The Hamas could have done anything in that time. They could have brought up a new generation of Gazans to live beside their Israeli neighbors and have the same dream that so many of the Israelis massacred on the 7th had, which was to live in peace with their neighbors. They could have done that. They could have created a thriving state. They could have not used the outside investment from American taxpayers, European taxpayers,
you'll have to go listen to the rest as to what they could have done and what they did do. But as you might anticipate, the sociopaths won, the psychopath led them, and the destruction is complete. What happens next is what Douglas Murray talks about at length with me. Go over to the YouTube channel, watch it, send it around to people. Thank you for doing that. Thank you, Adam. Thank you, Harley. Thank you, Dwayne. Thanks all of you watching on the Salem News Channel, listening on the Salem Radio Network, and all of our great affiliates across the United States. If you're in New Hampshire, my great stations up there, go tell Chris Sununu, run for Senate,